My name is Marty Hilton, and I'm president of Architecture Sarasota. A critical part of our mission is to support good design that addresses critical issues impacting the Sarasota region and beyond. These issues include affordable housing, coastal resilience, and sustainable urban development that embodies the aspirations of the community while retaining its character and sense of place. Architecture Sarasota is pleased to launch Downtown Sarasota, Hindsight, Insight, and Foresight, a 4-part speaker series conceived to spark a community-wide dialogue about the future of downtown Sarasota. Sarasota is experiencing a period of rapid growth and transformation. Here at Architecture Sarasota, we believe this series will provide a forum for residents, stakeholders, and community members to come together to understand better how we got where we are, what's happening now, and how Sarasota might evolve in the decades to follow. Renowned experts Andre Stwani, David Hull, Mitchell Silver, and Victor Dober will address vital topics including Sarasota 2020, the current master plan and how it was developed 2 decades ago, the macro level and local forces impacting the development of downtown, case studies from other locations, and best practices for urban planning and design. The third installment is renowned urban planner Mitchell Silver, former president of the American Planning Association and former commissioner of New York City Parks and Recreation. Mr. Silver will present best practices for downtown master planning and will present case studies from other locations that are relevant as we consider how to move Sarasota forward. Mitchell J. Silver, FAICP, and Honorable ASLA. Mitchell is a principal with McAdams, a land planning and design company. He is responsible for providing advisory services in urban planning, parks and public space planning. He's an award-winning planner with more than 38 years of experience, is internationally recognized for his leadership and contributions to contemporary planning issues. He is a prolific public speaker and specializes in, besides urban planning, placemaking and implementation strategies. And prior to joining McAdams, Mitchell served as the commissioner of the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, the chief planning officer in Raleigh, North Carolina, and as president of the American Planning Association and the American Institute of Certified Planners. Mitchell is one of the nation's most celebrated urban thinkers. He was selected for the Planazine's list of 100 most influential urbanists in the world. And in addition, he has been honored as one of the top 100 city innovators in the world by UBM Future Cities. And the Urban Times named him one of the top international thought leaders of the built environment. And I have to say, after spending the last 24 hours with him, he's a remarkable thinker. And we're so honored to have you with us, Mitchell. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I first want to say a couple of thank yous, Howard and Marty, for inviting me, my guardian angel, Fred and Sherry Merrill. My paracord, I somehow lost it, and I'm trying to finish my presentation, and they went to Best Buy. So what you see tonight is a credit. Round of applause for Fred and Sherry. And also, it's a pleasure also to meet Ann last night in our dinner. So I also, too, want to say happy Valentine's Day. The reason why I'm saying that is that my wife is not totally thrilled, but if we can go to the next slide. That's a picture of my wife and I. So if you all would do me a favor, it's also our engagement anniversary. I proposed to my wife. So if all of you, I'm going to say just happy Valentine's Day, Mary, on a count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Happy Valentine's Day, Mary.
Thank you. Y'all have kept me out of the doghouse for at least a week. So yes, I'm a romantic. So I am so delighted to be here. Part of my remarks is really to take a look at the city of Sarasota. When Howard reached out to me, I have a speech I've given in the past called Hindsight, Insight, Foresight. To me, that really gives you the full perspective of a city. You can't just look forward. Great things have happened in the past. Understand what's happening now, but where are you going forward in the future? And in my analysis, I always look at a city. Some places need to go from bad to good, from good to great, or great to greater. You're in the latter category. I'm really impressed. And I certainly want to bring my wife back here. In fact, I may have to do that since I've been here by myself. It's beautiful. I went for a run this morning, got to experience the city, went on a walking tour, and really got to enjoy this city. And let me also put on my timer so I make sure I stay on time. And there we go. So I like to start with a larger context. In your case, my recommendation as I look at your city is how to go to good to great or great to greater. I really enjoyed my time, love the streetscape, love the fabric, love the energy, love the weather, yes, I love the weather. I'm from New York, I love this weather. Bring on the 50s. But I want to take a kind of a global look to see where you fit in. Now, this chart tells you about the top real estate markers for 2024 real estate. And as you can see, for whatever reason, Florida's not on the list, but this is the top real estate market. Don't ask me how Boston gets on that list, but they're on there. But then Zillow put out this report, really focused on predictions of improved affordability. And from their perspective, here are the top 10 markets. I'm still shocked, like Buffalo, really, Buffalo? I guess there are affordable places in Buffalo. But you see where Orlando and Tampa surface on the list. So I went a bit deeper and I found something from Insurify, and from their perspective, Sarasota, guess what? You're the #1 market to watch in 2024. And they're saying that you're primed for success in the next few years. There's been a 24 increase in housing units between 2022 and 2023. And they really spoke to developers and they're very excited and they're anticipating all this growth as a result of the population surge. So get ready. Change is coming, and I always believe you want to get ahead of that change versus to respond to the change. It's better to proact than to react, and that's a lot of remarks I'm going to share with you. I also like to talk about some of these emerging trends or migration trends. I really enjoyed 2022. It was a telltale sign. A lot of people were moving across the country. Quality of life at that time was the top concern. People were moving to places with outdoor experiences. The continuation of remote to work, really kind of an outgrowth of what we call the post-COVID era. And you can see, they're coming, you know it, they're coming to the state from California, Illinois, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. Anybody here from those states, just raise your hand. You see, your neighbors, they're coming from all over, and Pennsylvania replaced New York in 2022. And they're coming to these 5 states, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arizona, and Florida. Florida surpassed Idaho. I guess those Californians felt it wasn't too far enough, so they came to the Sunshine State. And another reason was the flexibility of remote to work and early retirement. But 2023, we saw a slight change. The move volume, this is from North American Moving Services, decreased by 12%, but yet those same states remain at the top of the list. And as you can see, Minnesota and Washington replaced Michigan and New Jersey as people that were leaving. Howard sent me an article about Massachusetts, so I'm pretty sure they're going to surface on this list. But the reason is it's not about the COVID restrictions anymore. They're less important. Instead, it's individuals taking advantage of hybrid work or remote work options to relocate to the suburbs and to the south. So more people are coming to Sarasota and Sarasota County. This is my personal list of emerging trends that I always watch as a planner. I believe it's my obligation for the mayor, for elected officials, for the citizens, that I need to watch these emerging trends like a stockbroker watches the market. If we're planning, what are we planning for? And so I update this list every year to make sure that we're on top of the trends. AI is the one that surfaced on the list this year. All the others basically remain the same. And so I have to navigate these emerging issues to find out, what does it mean for Sarasota? What does it mean for Florida? What does it mean for North Carolina? Each place is different, so these are some of the issues that I watch. But if we take a step back about the growth of this country, over the next 40 years, the United States is expected to add 72 million people to the United States. That means somehow we're going to have to find 28.8 million new housing units and billions of square feet to support that growth. And so the question is, what will the next generation of communities look like? The 1950s, the 1970s, or something very different. So I looked at Sarasota County to see what your predictions would be over the 40 years. And it turns out for Sarasota County, you're expected to grow by 2060 by over 200,000 people, which means you need 100,000 units to absorb that growth, because you're roughly about 2.1, 2.06 people per household. And so they're coming. That household's expecting. You have to figure out, how do you plan for it? You can't say we don't want the growth. They're coming. You saw all those trends happening nationally. They're moving from other states. They're moving to Florida. And to Sarasota in particular, you see the growth trend. Marty mentioned it. You're growing rapidly. And by 2030, you will reach 66,000 residents in the city. To absorb that additional growth will take about 3,000 units right now. That's what's happening underway. So you will see that growth pressure. And the reaction is, oh, no, we don't want the growth. Basically, land is entitled. It's hard to say no. And so this is the question is not you want the growth, but how do you plan and anticipate? I met Steve Cover, a very talented planner, met his team yesterday. They're there to help you figure it out. So we need to partner with the planning department, with city government, and developers to figure out to do this the right way. So my part of the presentation is really to talk about insight, but also foresight. So I have a menu for you. I have 10 critical elements that will really make tomorrow's downtown. And I'll go through each one of them relatively quickly, then we'll stop and ask questions. I will stop on a couple to really amplify a point of view. But these are the 10 that I'll be discussing throughout this presentation. It's recorded, so if I go too fast, you can always go back and watch it again. The first is demographic change. I won't focus too much on the browning of America, but certainly the graying of America is underway. This has been predicted for many years. You know, some call it the silver tsunami. They didn't name it after me, but we see this occurrence throughout the country. In fact, Japan is probably experiencing the worst. They're now selling more adult diapers than children's diapers in Japan. The trend is just absolutely phenomenal, and you see this in country after country. The other one, you see household type changing. You're going to be surprised what I'm about to share with you about how you're seeing this traditional notion of a family in the United States does not exist anymore. We think it still exists, but it doesn't. Rise of single personal households, and that what really has changed in the market is no one thought these millennials would ever buy homes. We thought they were urban creatures. Well, COVID reset that. They're now moving to what we call second-tier cities. They're buying homes, and so that is really changing the landscape because we thought they would never do that. So as I mentioned, well, we're getting older, we're living longer, we're healthier, we're more active, and because of science and other technology, we're just living much longer. The other point is we now see this rise of single-person households. By 2030, the majority household will be one person. Not a family, one person. And I'll get into that in 1 second. So by 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be over the age of 65. 1 in 5 Americans will have a disability. Life expectancy will increase in the United States from 76 years in 1993 to 82.6 years by 2050. You know, I'm a boomer. Turned 63, I'm excited. I want to be around for as long as possible. So this is exciting, but by 2050, the number of Americans over 85 will triple from 5 million to 19 million here in America. That is a trend that we're seeing. Land patterns may have to change. This is a shocker, but on average, 1,000 people over every year over the age of 70 stop driving because they can no longer drive. And the question is, concerns about isolation and mobility will clearly be a factor. We want to make sure we plan and adapt to, you know, at one point people said maybe the autonomous vehicles. I don't know about you. I'm not getting in an autonomous vehicle. I want to live to 82.6, so I'm going to pass on it. But we're also looking at these generational profiles. This is important. I've been doing this, and one of the early planners that came up with this approach about how these generational profiles work as we plan. And I have to tell you, it's very telling. Now, I have to applaud the greatest generation. They're 97 years and older. My father was World War II veteran. He was part of this generation. What defined them and why they were the greatest is that they gave their tomorrow for our today. Let me repeat that. They gave their tomorrow for our today. There is not one generation that existed after that that thought like the greatest generation. Most people now are saying, I'm going to give away your tomorrow. for my today. And that's where we are. And so I'm hoping somehow we can get back to the greatest generation. They're 97 years and older, but you see all the different generations. The newest one unseen is now Generation Alpha. The reason why I bring this up is I did a little analysis about you, Sarasota City and County and the state and the United States, and compared to Raleigh. Now, I'm a boomer, I'm older, but oh my goodness, I have been doing this since 2008. I have not seen a chart like this. You're a very mature and healthy population. Look at your median age for the city, 49.8, the county, 57.5. Compare it to Florida, United States, and where I live in Raleigh. But what's really interesting is the population under 40. That is 40%, or even under 55 is 56% compared to the others. This is not a bad thing. There are just implications when you have an older population that resides in a city. And so it's not good or bad. As a planner, we have to understand what are the implications? What does that mean to have a population of older residents? And so I'll get into that further in my presentation. But this is a very important slide because I use this as kind of a diagnostic tool when I go to places. And for me, it's very helpful to understand the essence, the DNA of a population, so I understand when we go to hearings or proposals are brought forward, what happens. And because the reason is that from these generations, it drives consumer preferences and market demand. And an older generation has different desires for a community than a younger person. And so that's the things that we have to talk. The best case I remember when I was in Raleigh, the younger generation wanted food trucks. It was a cool thing at that time. All the older residents kept saying, we don't want food trucks. It's brick and mortar. It's competing against us. They're on wheels. We're on a foundation. It's not fair. And someone said, look, different kind of food cuisine. The people who go to food trucks are not going to eat in your restaurant. But it takes time to understand these changes because it's the generational profile. You know, here's one indicator that shocks me. You know, I used to give this at college campuses, and I see this man talking to this young woman through my presentation, and I say, young lady, don't listen to him. He's not serious. How do I know? This chart tells me so. For whatever reason, that sweet spot where people got married between 25 and 34 is dropping like a rock. Some are not getting married, or they're waiting longer, or they're just living together without getting married. So this is a trend that we're seeing across the country. And in fact, if you look at how our households are changing, in the 1960s, 44% of US households had children. And now it's dropped down to 2020 to 27%. So when people think about the ideal family as a couple married with kids, rare. Less than a third of the US population fits that category. Married couples, steadily dropping since the 1960s. Single-person households, on the rise. Well, what's happening? Well, guess what? It's not just boomers or widowers. Men, I hate to tell you, your wives will outlive you. I already told my wife, that's a fact, that's it is. But we see the rise in baby boomers, mostly widow and widowers. It's also Gen X, millennials, and to a small measure, Gen Z. That is now driving our population. What kind of housing do they want? A big house or an apartment or a condominium? So the population's changing. You need to watch locally how this is affecting you because this has a direct correlation to the type of housing you need to be building and providing. And yes, developers watch this as well. Home builders watch this as well, which is why they went from single-family homes to more townhomes and missing middle products. This is going to affect your region, and you need to find out how it affects you. So from my perspective, it's not just about what's next. It's about who's next. And I believe there's going to be a lot of tension over the next 10 years while basically what I call the 21st century values clash with the 20th century values. To me, it's not about left or right. It's about different values from different centuries. And as we see the under 55 moving into power, we have to work together. They have innovation energy. We have wisdom. We've got to partner together to make sure we plan for a better tomorrow rather than having that tension. That is my hope. That is my dream. Next is healthy living. So the 55 plus, they're moving to Florida. They're active. We know that. As I told you, they'll be living longer, 82.6 by 2050. They love biking, walking, access to greenways and trails. And oh my God, they love pickleball. As commissioner of New York City, I cannot tell you how this took over. In fact, there was one playground where this grandfather and grandmother kicked all the kids out of the park so they can play pickleball. I mean, it was like the police had to come, but pickleball. But what we see about the 55 plus, they're active. They have money, and they're mobile, and they're moving, and they're choosing places, and they're choosing, as you all know, Sarasota as a place to live. And I walked around, I can see why. This is a paradise, this is a great place. Whether you're here full year or 6 months, I get it. But this is now not an uncommon scene where you're seeing people very active and healthy and are looking for those amenities to make sure they stay healthy. As I said, I ran this morning, and I can't tell you the number of people I saw out there walking and jogging of all ages, and so it was refreshing. I mean, just look at the joy on this man's face just biking. This was not planned. I mean, look at the sheer joy. You know, when I was a commissioner, I said, we're not just Parks and Recreation, we're the Department of Fun, Health, and Happiness, and this should be the poster child, you know, for that effort. I mean, this is the joy people are getting from being outdoors and having those recreational amenities. I just want to make sure you have more of it here in this county. And so you see, both before and now after COVID, this explosion of greenway networks and trails that people are enjoying for walking, for biking, to get out, because it's not just about physical health, it's about mental health. And you're seeing all these grants across the country and proposals. And like I said, I ran there this morning. This is so beautiful. Sarasota, we want more of this. Please build more and connect it throughout the region. Now, I didn't want to take pictures of people because they get super sensitive, but like I said, I saw at least 100 people. I ran 3 miles over the Causeway Bridge. I don't know whoever recommended that idea, but that was a hike up that hill. But anyway, I saw, and they were walking there as well, of all ages, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s with headphones on, walking over there. Build more of this. It's so important. People will crave it. You will get your money's worth. So that brings me to this whole point about regionalism. Sarasota, you do not have to do it on your own. Understand the value of regionalism. Because you rise as a region, you fall as a region. You don't have to provide all of it, but one thing I'm blessed is I live in a Research Triangle region, Raleigh, North Carolina. If we don't have it, it's in Cary, it's in Durham. We work together, we cheer together. When you get off the airport, you don't see Raleigh. It says, welcome to the Triangle region. If you get a new office in Cary, they may live and shop in Raleigh. You get a new tech company in Durham, they may live and work in Raleigh. And so my point is, understand the value of regionalism, because if you want to build this network, Raleigh, we have 150 miles of greenways. Not all in Raleigh, but it's connected all over. And people don't just buy a place. They buy a place, they don't buy a home. They look at all the regional assets that you have to offer. When I was in Raleigh, we understood we were growing, and so we made sure we did this ULI exercise of putting all these dominoes to show how are we going to grow. And our point was transit, vibrant centers, and green space. And I'll come to this slide many, many times. We wanted to make sure we were able to grow in a way that benefited our community. I'll come back to this. So we followed that same vibrant centers approach. But as far as you're concerned, I am so impressed that if you have this regional approach, Sarasota, you are the regional hub for arts and culture. You are the regional hub for arts and culture. I was running around, so the art, I'm impressed, the opera, all these assets. That's your contribution to this region. You don't have to be everything, but to me, a region should have something, and I can tell you from the Opera House and other things I've seen, you claim that spot and nobody can take that away from you. North of they should compete. That's you. And you feel it, it's in your DNA, it's part of you. So that's part of your regional contribution. Let me talk about a blueprint for growth, because we all talked about these challenges that are coming. So the question is, how are you going to prepare for all of this growth happening? Let me tell you what I believe the role of planning is. Steve, you can confirm whether I'm being accurate. But to me, planning is about managing growth and change, the risk and uncertainty about the future. We want to make sure, public, we as planners got your back. We're thinking about these trends and trying to suggest to you, how do we manage it and be proactive versus reactive? Think about that all the time. And I always challenge cities that there are 2 types of cities or places. Either you're a plan-making place that follows a plan, or you're a deal-making place that everything's transactional. I can tell you one thing, being a plan-making place is predictable. The elected officials, to developers. The citizens know exactly what to expect because it's on a plan and you follow it. Deal making is, hey, let's make a deal. Developers don't like it because they don't know how much they're going to invest to get what they want at the end of the stream. And so I challenge you that what kind of region, what kind of city of you want to be, deal making or plan making. Deals are not bad, but to me, essence, from your essence, what do you want to be? The last point that I have to say again and again is that, I've been saying this for probably 30 years, that when you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. When someone says no, I'm saying, okay, when I was in Raleigh, they said, no, we don't want rentals. No, so I said, so what you're saying is yes, seniors, young professionals, veterans, people with disabilities, we don't want you in our community. Is that what you're saying? And so we had to work through this no, because that was the reaction. No, turn it down, we don't want it. But then what are the implications of saying no? Now, they may be valid reasons, but we need to have that conversation. And so to me, the role of planning is really talk about those implications. They're not good or bad, but what are those implications? The purpose of the plan is to have a blueprint for growth, be clear about the problems you're solving, set a vision and framework for the future, understand the value of land, which I'll get into, hopefully if I have time, preserve your authentic places, and focus on implementation. And the real question is, which is the topic of this series, is it time for a new downtown plan? Is 20 years old. You had Dwani here, Andreas Dwani. The question is, are there time to go from great to greater? And so that's something that you all need to determine. For us in Raleigh, we were transitioning from a small town identity. I got a lot of heat because I said we're going from Mayberry to Metro. How dare you call us Mayberry? I said because you have a statue of Annie Griffith in our park, so I'm assuming it was Mayberry. But we were growing fast, 12 to 15,000 a year, and you can see all the trends. So I had to define the problems, not just what would you like Sarasota to be in the future? What problems are we solving? Let's be clear that we're on the same page. So we went through that exercise. From my glance, Sarasota, here, I believe some of you are a destination for retirees. Some have fixed income. So I'm saying it's a challenge. Tourist economy, vacation rentals, seasonal residents, so sometimes people are here 6 months, 4 months, so that is a challenge you'll have to face. Lack of attainable housing, subject to labor shortages because people can't afford here. Some people that are serving you in this industry may be driving an hour to 90 minutes just to take care of you. And we have to think about that. Zoning flexibility is controlled by the state, not uncommon across the country, and then development pressures due to growth. It's coming. So you have to work with the planning department and the city council have a plan about how to handle that. What we did in Raleigh, the same thing you're doing right now, we had a lecture series. We called it Designing a 21st Century City. People drove 90 minutes to come to this lecture. It was the only game in town. And so we talked about how do you design a 21st century city? How do you make a pedestrian-friendly city? Every session had a question to pique someone's interest. Then we had Kid City to engage the kids and their parents. It was so cute. We actually had the city, to see one of the images, a child had to build a box and then put it on one of the taped lots, but they had to get a permit first. We told them it was non-conforming, they couldn't put it there. You should have seen them. Then the mother's like, how dare you? I said, ma'am, we have a Board of Appeals on that table over there. It was educational. But these are the kids that will know the city in the future by 2030, and we were able to engage the parents and tell them the importance about having a well-planned city. Very, very effective. And then, believe it or not, our newspaper, the whole Sunday supplement, talked about what will Raleigh look like in 2030. I couldn't believe it. It was a full conversation throughout the entire city. And we developed these key themes. I'll leave the thing about equity because I've been talking about it for 30 years. Now it's been discovered and now it's been a bit of I forgot, nonpartisan. Okay, scratch, you didn't hear anything about equity, pass. And then we came up with, to me, was the beauty of our plan, which was this growth framework plan. We decided to become a polycentric city, and everything you see in dark colors, there were 8 growth centers. That's where the growth was going to take place. If you lived in a low-density neighborhood in the yellow, you're fine. Nothing's going to change. And we had 12 multimodal corridors, and that's how we were going to manage our growth. 60 to 70% of all growth would happen where you see those brown places. The downtown is purple. And guess what? We measured it 10 years later, and 65% of all growth went to those places. Plan making, not deal making. So we also focus on implementation. There's 3 ways you implement a plan: through policy guidance and actions, through your code, and through capital projects. And so we focused clearly that every recommendation had to fit in one of these categories. If it didn't, it got tossed. Because we want to make sure this was a plan that was based in reality and got done. So I'll come back to the map again, but another theme that emerged is that this whole notion of traditional neighborhood development, something CNU, Congress of New Urbanism, Andreas Duany was a founder. We fully supported having walkable neighborhoods, walkable blocks, housing and shopping in close proximity, human scale, range of housing. These are all the attributes that really give a strong sense of place, and we believe that is important to support a downtown or other mini downtowns throughout your region. This is an example that had changed years ago. Sidewalks were on one side of the street. So if you were lucky to hit the lottery, you got a sidewalk. Otherwise, you had to walk in the street in order to get from place to place. That has now changed. Love your roundabout, so there's one here as well. But it also could be scaled up. New urbanism is not just about single family, but it's also more urban. This is in Woodstock, Georgia. Another place that leans heavy into new urbanism. Delightful place, railroad track, very powerful. Love visiting that place. It's just an amazing example. And then Charlotte, this one has transit. It's showing you again, it's very moderately scaled, but you have something walkable, very attractive to young people. They enjoy it. But this is that walkable pedestrian atmosphere that people are looking for. And like I said, I enjoy downtown. Very walkable, enjoyed it. So keep doing what you're doing, Sarasota. But this is where I want to focus my attention on placemaking. Placemaking is about creating an experience, making sure your places are authentic and memorable. If I want to go to St. Augustine, I'll go there. I want to come to Sarasota, I want to see Sarasota. I don't want to be anywhere USA. And there are parts of your city that it was very authentic and real, and I thought it was absolutely beautiful. Also, the power of 10, what does that mean? Project for Public Space came up with this kind of useful tool that every city should have 10 places and 10 things to do within each destination, each place. And so that's an aspiration because people want the experience, not just doing one thing. You go to opera, I want to go to a restaurant. I want to go to a park nearby. You want to be able to put all those experiences in so that people don't just have one thing to do, they have multiple things to do. So that's important. It's not just a project, it's a place. It's not just a district, it's a destination. And these places need to be people-centered. I believe people may eat and sleep in their apartments and homes, but they live in public space. That's where they thrive, that's where they gather, that's where they connect. Your sidewalks with outdoor restaurants, oh, how cool is that? Loved walking your downtown, Main Street, and other parts of your downtown. So I believe that older generations are consumers of goods, but the younger generations are consumers of experiences. So I challenge people, planners, designers, to not just be planners and designers, but to be experience builders, to build an experience. And you'll see some examples of what I mean. That's what brings people to your place. That's what brings it back to Sarasota, all the tourists, as a vacation spot. So I show you this map 3 times. The reason why I want to show you is that I'll show you how we're able to use this framework, and I encourage you to do one for your downtown, to help build our city. So we call it plan to action. It was to build great streets, great places, and great spaces, and that's exactly what we did. We went to each place and started to figure out how to change the zoning, make it easy to do and not hard to do, change all of our rules to incentivize what we wanted to see. So we basically changed the rules for what we want to see and made it hard for what we did not want to see. Moore Square with Fred Merrill and his team Sasaki, this is one of the places that we're able to redevelop. This is one of our downtown parks. In the heart of our downtown, they have 5 squares. This is another project that now is completed called Smoky Hollow. Active, now this is a nice pedestrian way. Best barbecue is at this place. Amazing to come to Raleigh, go to Smoky Hollow. This is now Downtown South, one of my visions to bring downtown further. There's going to be an arena there, but people are now seeing the experience, all of this following the growth framework map. The zoning followed, the planning, all of it's now coming together. And then not far from where I live, the Innovation District in North Hills. It's not just a project, it's a place. And it came from the framework of understanding how it all worked. We did not want to have a hub and a spoke city. We wanted to be polycentric, so now I don't have to go downtown, I can, but this is 10 minutes away from my house. I can now go to North Hills. And so this is how you build up those great places throughout your city that will complement downtown, that will help you figure out how to become a great region. And so I see this. The bones are there in Sarasota. I loved the spot last night. And I love sunset. It's the coolest time to take a picture, by the way, is sunrise, sunset. So I caught it just in time. But here it is. Some great restaurants, great atmosphere, great vibe. So it's there. Just build on it. Go from great to greater. And then the park. Of course, I'm a commissioner of parks, formerly, and so I was hunting around, didn't see many parks. I encourage you, build more of these public spaces downtown. Please, please, please. Greenways, parks, density and open space go together like peanut butter and jelly. You gotta have both. They go together. And then the art. I was touched. I really was. I was running. The guys that were in front of the art ovation, like say, what took you so long? I said, dude, man, I saw so many things. I was taking pictures, I was stopping. He's like, as a runner, you can stop? Of course you can stop. Whoever thinks runners like, don't stop, we stop. I took so many pictures, thank you. It was just a great experience. And the memory, I talked about memorable places. Sarasota is now memorable to me. I go to a lot of places. I'm gonna remember Sarasota. Keep doing this. Keep doing this. It's important. And it really reflected that diversity that I was hoping to see. Absolutely beautiful. But we also want to talk about access to these social gathering places. This is not on the public side. This is now on the private side. And so you're seeing a lot of developers are offering these public places in their projects. These are all real shopping malls across the Carolinas. Before I get into that, I want to talk about something for me personally that was moving. During COVID, I was commissioner of parks. At the same time we were having protests, and I have to say it was probably the lowest period of my life where I was a broken person because I had to manage staff. We still had to take care of parks. I know there were issues all over the country, but in New York, we were getting 800 deaths a day. 800. And we had to figure out what to do. We had to open up our parks to give people a safe place to get outside because there was nowhere else to go. But all of us were broken. Our mental health was bad, and so I reached out to the mental health department, and they gave us this class to talk about the impact of stress and anxiety and trauma. And they said, you know, it's physical, it's emotional, it's behavioral, it's cognitive, it's spiritual. And this is what our residents were going through. Memory problems, emotional outbursts, denial, fear, irritability, anger. All this was happening to our residents. It was happening to our staff, and it was happening to us. And so we said, as parks, what can we do to help address some of these concerns? And who knew there was a Trauma Stewardship Institute? But there is. And so they talked about go outside, be active, cultivate relationships, spend time with animals. We brought little kittens and puppies into the office. The line went around the block, and how it just calmed people down. And so we recognized that we had to play this role, and we leaned into our parks. And we learned during COVID that our parks, greenways, and public spaces became our sanctuaries of sanity because they gave us the power to heal, but also to bring joy. And so we just went crazy trying to figure out ways. We actually had these signs that say it's okay to hug a tree, and people were hugging trees. These actors were taking Instagram posts. Sorry to include that, but it was like so cool. It just took off. We put 2,000 signs all over New York City because we wanted to help the healing process, the isolation that people were feeling during the lockdown. But the reason I say that is now we see the private sector. These are all private projects, not public. This is called a hub. They took containers next to Research Triangle Park. This is now a place people hang out. It's a restaurant. It's a cool environment. These are common in all the shopping centers. They put a little bit of a lawn and cornhole, kids rolling around. I mean, they'll shop, but they wrap it with restaurants. This is the trend that we're seeing, the little things you can do to just humanize and create these social gathering places. And again, you're seeing it again and again and again. And then we're starting to see really the popularity of parks and open spaces just bringing people together. And I wrote an article with Carol Coletto, who is head of the Memphis Parks Conservancy, about how strategic investments in parks can spark economic vitality. That's a picture of Domino Park in New York City. I can't believe they're sitting so close together, but hey, it's New York. What can I say? But the most impressive park I've seen in North Carolina is this one right here. It's the Cary Downtown Park. really understand the importance. It is so crowded, they have to shuttle people in to get to this park. It is that popular. Do not underestimate the power of parks. Do not. And both greenways and trails, as I said to you, is something you should certainly invest in. You will certainly see your value. I'll skip these. These are other things other cities are doing. They say, I don't have any parks, but I tell them, you got streets. Streets can be parks. If you have a street, you could have a park. And so here are some examples of that. This is in Raleigh, North Carolina. We took one of our main streets near a university, and now it's become kind of an outdoor park. You have a lot of alleys. Thank you, John Nolan. This is what's happening in Australia. They're taking their alleys and making them the coolest places ever. They call them laneways. But this is some of the things that they're doing to really reposition for economic development purposes, the intimate spaces. Yes, some are service corridors, but maybe some of them don't serve their purpose. And so they can be reimagined and repositioned. And here are examples in Wilmington, these alleyways that people are converting to really public places, very creative. And you have a lot of that here. The bones are there again. Sarasota, you're doing great things. So I just want to commend you. Keep doing good and go from great to greater. Anybody knows what this is? Okay, Marty and Howard thought I was crazy. I'm like, this is so cool. I'm so excited. There's so much opportunity here. And they're like, what is wrong with him, this guy? But I see this enlivened. And so the first thing I thought about is this amazing place called the Grove in Asheville. And like, isn't it a little bit different? See the possibility? Now, it wasn't designed that way. Yes, there's light over it. But when I saw this one, I said, this is a great people space. This is an amazing people space. And yes, I know BMO is there, but with every reposition, can you imagine the potential of not just being an underpass, but an actual arcade that now is covered by the sun and the rain and is a cool place to be. So again, start to reimagine some of your public spaces. And I think you would actually go from great to greater. I'm going to talk about housing affordability. Wow, I'm on time. I'm very happy about this. This is a tough subject because I know it's a big issue in your community, but really to talk about housing affordability and attainability. But I do feel also what's important is that we have to address the fear and stigma about renters. It's a big problem across the country. Okay, just by a show of hands, how many ever rented in their life? Just raise your hand. Okay, I'm getting my camera. I'm taking a picture of this. That's my point. I think in some stage in our life, we're all renters, but for some reason, it's a challenge in this country. As I mentioned, young professionals coming out of school, people who are on fixed income and on Social Security, people with disabilities, veterans, people who work in this community. We have to rethink what housing means. And so I looked at what's happening in this region. This is not going to surprise you. You know, the Chamber, they're looking at ways of seeking to address Sarasota's affordable housing crisis. Another group seized by Sarasota's housing crisis, young professionals. We want to live here. We want to live here. We're your kids. We're your grandkids. We want to live here. You can't. We'll get into some of the reasons why. So one of the approaches that we try to use in Raleigh is really offer a lot more housing choices. I'll give you a menu in a second of how do you address it. We came up with cottage courts to have density without going vertical was one option. I'm sure you have this here too, accessory dwelling units where you can put, we call them backyard cottages. You could put something in the rear yard. And then the newest intervention people are talking about is missing middle. These are duplex, triplex, fourplex that look like single family, but they house more people. This is an option that people are now recommending in single family zoning. Some folks are freaking out across the country, but it is another tool that people are exploring. That's what it looks like. If you didn't know, that's multifamily. It's not, it's single family row houses, that's multifamily. But it's trying to blend in so we can address the housing crisis and provide more affordability. This is a slide that you're going to find illuminating. This is not to make anyone feel uncomfortable, but it's another side of the equation most people don't look at. Everyone who owns property has a God-given right to sell it for whatever price that they can get. If I say your home is worth $300,000 and I say I'll give you $600,000, you're going to say, no, I'll take the $300,000. You're going to take the 600,000. I will take the 600,000. But what has happened is, as people, places that are desirable will always have an affordable housing problem. Let me repeat that. Places that are desirable will always have an affordable housing problem because people want to be there. This is an example in Wake County in North Carolina. In 2020, there were 23 well, I'll go to the bottom line. Between the COVID period, 73,000 homes were sold, most over asking price. And as a result, the median housing price increased by $120,000. Not developers, individual homeowners exercising their God-given right to sell their home for whatever they can get. And they have a right to do that. But the implication is it made housing less affordable and it trickled into the rental market. The problem is we ask for the solution. We say, developers, give us affordable units, city, do something. We all have a shared responsibility to figure this out. The one thing that's not going to happen is that homeowners are going to be left out of this equation. I'm not blaming anyone because I would do the same thing. I want to unpack the reason why things are unaffordable, but no one talks about this. No one talks about this. It's a reality. So I believe that we have to use as many options as possible to address this issue. So Howard asked me to come up with some of the options. There's options. You can't do one. You have to do multiple. What Raleigh, North Carolina is doing is they passed an affordable housing bond of $75 million, and they're using it to acquire land, to make deals with low-income housing developers or low-income tax credits. They're doing all these things. And so this is what I'm offering to you. You can't just do one. You have to do a lot of them. But you have to be intentional, and you really have to address the stigma and fear of renters, because that, to me, is the challenge of providing attainable housing units in your community. It's something you have to discuss. And so this is a list I offer you. This PowerPoint presentation will stay with you, but these are some of the things on the table that you have to discuss. Otherwise, you'll have labor shortages, people will have to move further away, those young professionals will not be able to live here, and so that's something you have to contemplate as a community. I have two more sections before I close, perfect timing, and I want to share with you understanding the value of land. To me, and this is more so to understand that, you know, as a jurisdiction, Sarasota, your land has value. You have 15 square miles, that's all you have, unless you have the ability to annex, you have 15 square miles. And that land has value. How you zone it will increase or decrease the value. And so it's very important you understand how land generates tax revenue. I remember when I was in Raleigh, people were upset that you keep building downtown, stop building downtown. I'm saying, okay, time out. It would take 600 single-family homes on a 150-acre subdivision to equal the tax value of 1 acre of one of our high-rises downtown. We could do 150 acres or 1 acre, same tax value. In fact, that tower in our downtown had 90 times the tax value per acre. And so I told them that if you do not support this approach, what you're really saying as a homeowner is that I'll pay the taxes, I'll pay the tax load, I'll volunteer, and you don't want to do that. We want to spread it and concentrate it in areas where we get a better yield on tax. To put it another way, the downtown high-rise downtown on a 3-acre site would pay off its infrastructure in 3 years, return on investment 35%. A suburban project on 30 acres would take 42 years to pay off its infrastructure, and the return on investment is 2%. So we share this with our city council. It helped us make better decisions. We still did projects in these areas, but at least they understood the tax implications. So we had to, this is from Urban 3, a colleague of mine in Asheville. We tried to share the difference between a Walmart and a downtown. Walmart on 34 acres, downtown building, only 6 stories, 5 acres. Real estate taxes from the Walmart, $6,500, that little building, 10 times the amount. They go, well, Walmart offers jobs. They do, but 6 per acre. The downtown building, 74, pre-COVID, 74. So you're seeing how this works, that it's smart to use those growth centers to target investment so you can preserve and conserve the lower density neighborhoods. We did the same thing in Raleigh, no surprise. Walmart, $2,000 annual per acre. That 6-story building, $110,000. So we said we have a new approach here. So I asked my staff, kind of show me on a map where this value is located. And I said, can you put it into 3 dimensions? Can anybody tell me where downtown's located? Downtown is paying an older, and when we added those growth centers, that's what it looked like. So now we can help keep taxes low because we put density in the right place. And so that's how we're able to stabilize our tax base, but also provide quality growth centers and lifestyle centers that people can enjoy. Now I said one little caveat. This too has value. I walked your city, and one of the memorable places I went to was your Main Street. As I understand it, this is zoned for 10 stories. You're stuck. The state says you can't downzone. So I was talking to the planning department and whether you explore transfer of development rights or the city acquires some of those parcels to protect it. This has value. This is your soul. This is your identity. And when I come back with my wife, I want to take it to Main Street. You can't recreate that. And so even though I tell you there's value in land, there's also value in character. There's value in authenticity. And so as you look to do this plan, like we did, figure out the growth centers where you want to grow and the places you want to preserve, and then figure it out. There are planning tools, but figure it out. I love this Main Street. I just love the vibe. I love walking down. And then we went a block down. I know this is a new project. It has retail on the ground floor. It's good, but it wasn't like this. It wasn't. Now, this is providing affordable housing. I'm sure when it's complete, the wall's a little bit higher. You do have retail on the other side. So it's a good attempt, but I'm just saying, as you look at the value and think of these growth centers, also think about authentic, memorable. That too is very important. I'm going to close on designing for a changing climate. I was in New York City. It's a coastal city. For us, 520 miles of coast in New York City, 155 miles were in parks, and 14 miles of beaches. So I didn't know when I was commissioner, I was in charge of all this portfolio. And then Superstorm Sandy came. No one in New York cared about climate change. Just stop it. Until Superstorm Sandy came. 44 people were killed. In the region, it was more like 60. As Parks Commissioner, close to $1 billion of damage was done to our parks. People were stranded. 2/3 of our population were vulnerable. And for the first time, New Yorkers said, oh my goodness, this is real. And it was a storm surge, and so we decided to do something about it. And so there was this plan called Resilient City for neighborhoods, for buildings, for infrastructure, for coastal. And so I had to do, of course, the neighborhood and the park stuff. And so we looked at our parks and said, you know something? Our parks, they're public spaces, they're essential infrastructure, do all these things, but they're also our first line of defense against climate change. And so we leaned into what can we do with our park infrastructure to make it a better place. We came up with these publications, Designing for Flood Resiliency. We started everything I see in your city, permeable pavements, water retention, green roofs. We're doing what we can, not everything, it's not gonna stop it, but now we're changing the approach about how we design our parks, because now the parks don't just serve one purpose, now we do multiple purposes. And there are benefits to trees. I love your trees. Oh my goodness, I kept remarking to Howard, I want to take your trees and bring them to Raleigh. Different climate, but we have these lollipop trees where you have to kind of stand to get some shade. I like the ones with a broad canopy that really give you some shade. So we can learn something from Florida. And so we looked at these natural systems, these hard systems, these integrated flood protection. We looked at our waterfront, espionage, greenways, and really came up with a different strategy about how do we use our parks to protect land and people, including our beaches. And so here's one example in Hunters Point in Queens. This is a floodable park, protects all the upland buildings. Actually at high tide, what's so cool, you can see that creates an island. The bridge lets you off, but at high tide, we now have a park that's flooded that protects all the neighborhoods and is really cool to look at. This was a little bit challenging. This is where we had probably the most people, a large number that passed away, a lot of public housing projects on the east side of Manhattan. This was a Robert Moses Park that was really destroyed and under salt, and so now we're rebuilding it to elevate it by 8 to 10 feet. You'll see the switchback is how you get across if you have a disability. And now this is a new park, elevated 8 to 10 feet, is now under construction, and it's intended to protect life and property because of storm surge. And this is what it looks like from the other angle. You can see now how it's all elevated, but we got to get down, what we call it, so people can get down to the water. So this was our approach. So that is my presentation. I close by saying that smart places know their sense of urgency 10 years before it's urgent. In Sarasota, I know you're smart. Thank you all very much.
If you could write your questions on a card, and we have staff and volunteers if you just raise it up. The first one, though, I have is, if you became the king of Sarasota for a year, and I have been the last year, it's been nice. I recommend it. What would your very first priority for downtown be?
It's probably two. I would find ways of increasing parks and connect it to the greenway system along the, is it a bay? What is that? A bay? I would find a way of having a waterfront greenway along the bay with a connection to downtown. That would be my first priority. If I were king.
Okay, it is 2024. Our comp plan is 4 years past its sell-by date. How typical is this? How risky is this?
I don't think it's risky. I equate a plan to a retirement plan. I remember when I turned 40 and I said, it's time to get serious, and I hired a financial advisor, and he mapped out what it would look like the next 25 years until I turned 65. And he said, follow my advice and follow the plan. And I did. And I'm retiring next year, June 2025, and I am self-sufficient, and I'm fine, and I can stop working because I listened to my advisor. I followed the plan. A downtown plan, a comprehensive plan, is the same way if you follow it. If you know where you want to go by a certain date, and you take those steps, to me, it is not risky. It's only risky if you make a plan and put it on a shelf. Don't waste the public's time going through all these sessions and exercises if you have no intention to implement it. But if you do implement it, you have public buy-in, and make sure your plan transcends the terms of elected officials. It's the public's plan, not the elected officials' plan. And so it has to stand the test of time. If it's a 20-year plan, you would go ahead and make sure it fulfills its 20 years. If it has an expiration date, you better get going, because already it's starting to sour the community. So I would go ahead and make sure you start that process again. And I do believe it's time to take a fresh look. Circumstances change, times change, trends change. You want to make sure your plan stays current. And so if a 20-year plan expired, it's time to do a new one.
What about public transportation, particularly in and out of the downtown core?
Touchy topic. I always believe you should not have a solution looking for a problem. There are different mobility options, and so having something besides a car is good, but each community is different. You have to check to find out what works best. Having public transit for some is very useful, and there's now something called micro-mobility. So the answer is, it's always good to have more modes, not just a car. Not everyone owns a car. Not everyone wants to drive a car. But there are people of a certain age, as I mentioned, will not be able to drive a car. So you have car share, you have micro-mobility. To me, it is important that you explore all of them. So to me, it depends. There's not one size fits all. You need transit, you need this, you need that. It depends, and that's something this community, if they're gonna do a plan, they should certainly explore. In Raleigh, we were trying for light rail. We ended up with bus rapid transit as a default. They have bike lanes, but they go 2 blocks, it stops, it keeps going, so we have the e-bikes. So we're seeing this micro-mobility, which really is the e-bikes, the scooters. It's something very different than just the bicycles. And so in many major cities, the young population refuse to drive cars, and they're looking for alternative modes of transportation. So Because I mentioned earlier, because of your generational demographics, that's going to be a certain issue. And I know there are a lot of, in New York, seniors, because the bike lanes are next to the curb, there's a lot of bicycle to senior collision because they're not expecting walking off a curb for there to be a bike lane and looking. So you've got to explore those issues, particularly when you have a more senior population in your city.
Somewhat related to your comments about Main Street, how can we better preserve our historic buildings and streetscapes from the pressures, given the pressures of development?
There are a lot of tools. You have to make it a priority and be proactive. The longer you sit, the more the threat is there. It's hard because different states have different tools. Different states have different preservation tools. And so I'm not an expert in Florida, but certainly you want to either get an expert. If you don't have it on staff, you hire a consultant to figure this out. But if it's important, then you have to, like I said, there's got to be this sense of urgency. If it's a priority, you got to do it. I had mentioned one way of doing it is that the city actually acquires land, or the county. You own it. If you own it, you determine what its future is. There's something called transfer development rights, where you figure out what the value is, because I think it's up to 10 stories, and you're able to transfer it to another property so that that property is preserved. So there are different techniques that you can use. There are stark preservation ordinances that would require what you can and cannot do with property. That's subject to state law. But you do need a plan. You need a consultant so that you have a clear path forward, so when something does happen, you're not caught flat-footed.
What are Sarasota's best peer cities for comparison, in your opinion, and why?
Wow. I said earlier there's a question. I'm not from Florida, so I don't know. If I risk it, I get it wrong, you're going to hiss and people start heading for the doors and like saying, you ruined my Valentine's Day. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that. I don't know Florida well enough. I could tell you places I've been, but to me, to my knowledge, there's no place that compares. I mean, really, your downtown core, your main street is spectacular. So I just don't know anyone that I can compare it to. And plus, I was amazed when I saw you roughly about 60,000. I'm like, seriously? This is a cool city. I was like thinking you're about like 200,000. I said 60, so I'm impressed. Small footprint, 15 square miles, but I don't know. You stumped me. Who was that? You get some prize, whoever that is. Well, you know, I can't see any of you with these lights shining, but I know they're recording it, so we got to go with the flow. But usually I look at body language so I know when to deviate on a comment. I just went blind on this one, folks, so I hope it was okay. Next question.
Well, I have been all over Florida, and there is no place like Sarasota.
There you go. So I got the answer
magic.
right. I got partial credit.
Okay, if we continue to focus on the needs of the quote-unquote gray population, will we become a self-fulfilling prophecy by discouraging younger people from moving here? How do we encourage younger people to move here and to live?
Well, first you got to talk to them and find out what I talked about. They have different needs and aspirations. You have a conversation. When I have public meetings, I don't just plan for who shows up. I look at the demographics and we find them. Where are you? Let's talk. What are your concerns? What are your issues? How can we work it out? And then we pair the generations together so they understand, hey, I just graduated from such and such school with a master's. I'm the one who's looking for an apartment. Why are you telling I can't live here? So for me, I think it's starting to have those two, having a conversation, understand what the young demographic is looking for. We do know they love experience of place. You know, you have a great palette. I'm sure, I don't know what it's like, the night scene here, but you have the infrastructure to have a good time in downtown. And so at least you have that part. I'm assuming the young people are down there after hours. Are they? I can't see. You have it. The question is the housing and the jobs, because they need to have a job unless they're working remote. You definitely have the party scene, or at least the infrastructure. The question is, can they afford to live in Sarasota?
This question's about expanding on your example of the activation of the alleys. I think that was from Australia. If you had thoughts about activating these sort of unused urban spaces.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's That's a whole other presentation. I can go click it. No, the answer is reimagining public spaces, just like I talked about that arcade. You own it. If it's public, you own it. You don't have to buy it. You just reimagine it. I have examples. If you've been to New York, we went on a tear reimagining public spaces. If you've been to Madison Square Park, there was this asphalt. We turned into this oasis. We took down fences, we merged them. So that was a specialty of mine, is reimagining public space, including streets and sidewalks. Everything was fair game. So the answer is yes. You find them, you identify them, you can have design competitions. There are lots that you can do, bring the public in. And to me, those are untapped resources that provide great social gathering places at little to no cost. So certainly that is an opportunity. Good questions for writing them down in a card, because I know that's not fun, but you're doing well. You're doing well.
It's not fun.
Or Marty's making them up and he's putting his own questions in, I don't know.
Don't tell my secret. What solutions do you have or would suggest to address issues related to homelessness and homeless populations?
Oh, the homeless question came up. Again, it varies by state. If you're out west, oh my God. The rules out west are so different, where the homeless have more rights sometimes than unhoused than citizens. It's a challenge in California, Washington, and Portland. New York is very different. We do not tolerate anyone staying in a park overnight, no encampments. We bring in care teams. That's just our rules. But we also make sure that they get the help that they need. So it depends. But this is the part I want you to hear me out for a second, because this is what challenged me. We were in Morningside Park. This is a park right next to Columbia University. We just had a ribbon cutting because the Women's Garden Club had donated money to restore a fountain, a waterfall in the park, stunning waterfall. As I was leaving, I was commissioner and I was in my car. A woman came up to me and handed me 33 cents. And I'm saying, what is this for? And she said, oh, the homeless man over there wanted to donate to the park because when he leaves the shelter, this is where he comes to feel alive. And I paused for a second, because if parks are for all and he is unhoused, does he become part of all? And so I recognize we have a spectrum of the unhoused, from mentally ill to unstable, but there are others that just want peace in their life. For whatever reason in their life, they struggled to find a home. And so for me, I believe it's probably one of the things I want to do when I retire, is to volunteer to help the unhoused, because I've known some of the stories. There are some that are chronically ill, there are some that are mentally ill, but we can't put them all in one basket, and we have to exercise this with extreme care. And to find housing for the individuals, which is something I would like to do. So it's a hard question, but far too often it's out of sight, out of mind, when it's more nuanced than that. I've met some and heard their stories, and it breaks your heart. And so all I can tell you is that example of that man in that park won't leave my soul, because if he can't come to this sanctuary for a little bit of the day before he goes back to the shelter, where can he go? And so how do we coexist with the unhoused is a tough question. And rather than just say, out of sight, out of mind, I just think we have to take a step back. I'm a Christian, to figure out how do we offer that compassion, that offer that kindness to help these individuals. So I don't have a clear answer, but that's the response I have, and that's my commitment going forward once I retire.
You touched on your strategy, your process in Raleigh for your master plan. You noted that it began with a lecture series, not unlike this one, that served as a catalyst. Can you talk a little bit about what should be, from your point of view and the 24 hours you've been here, what should be our next steps here in Sarasota?
Well, you want to make sure that there is public support to do a plan. I don't believe you should force this. To me, if community feels there's a sense of urgency and we need a plan, can we agree on the problems we're solving? If there's agreement up front, then I think you are ready to do a plan. If there isn't agreement, then there's more conversation that need to happen. We did our plan. We were in a different situation. We were literally building suburban sprawl, 40 units to the acre, and I told the public, we're going to run out of land in 20 years. And they were like, what? So I communicated the sense of urgency, what had to change, and the public was on board. We have to communicate with citizens that this is the problems we need to address. Do you agree? If the answer is yes, and then you go forward and address it. Now, if people say no, then do not complain when all these projects start coming in and like, oh my goodness, everything becomes one-off, hand-to-hand combat, case by case. If that's what you want to do, it's exhausting. You can do that, but I think it's better to have a well-conceived plan. And so the first thing is make sure there's generally consensus that we need to do this plan. It gives the council comfort. You know the issues you want to address, and then you can reach out, hire a consultant, or do it in-house and start your next plan. So to me, that would be the important next step. You don't want to force a plan on a population that's not willing to have a plan.
So community, resident, stakeholder engagement, easily said, much more challenging to do. You mentioned the great program with the kids, building the cities. What are some of the most successful or a successful strategy for engagement?
I'm a consultant now, and when we do this one, we change it up each time. We've done events in parks where people have a passport and they go to each table and they engage. We've done churches, we've done cookouts, I've done taverns, I've done beer gardens to get the younger population. We do street fairs, tabling. We'll go wherever it is because we determine what population we want to reach, and then we figure out the best way to reach them. We don't subscribe to town hall meetings. That tends to attract generally the older generation. And so we figure out where we need to go. Kid City was one approach for the young kids in the museums. We will go to playgrounds, outside at least, so we capture both the children and their parents, community centers, day camps. So we do a variety of methods. It just depends on who we want to capture. The one at taverns and beer gardens, I remember back when we were doing the plan, they were like, dude, you are like in a tavern. How cool is this? They were really into it. They could not believe that we were having a public meeting with beer. But it worked. We got their input, and they were so respected the fact that we took the time to say we want to meet you where you are. Because we have the saying, you want to move at the speed of trust. And so we had to build their trust that we had their best interest at hand. And so we took different approaches to different audiences, and for us, it worked.
We want to thank you, Mitchell.
Thank you. Thank you.